Welcome back to Highly Respected. I'm your host, Scott Greer, and today we're going to have an incredible episode. And there were two big news events last week that we have to cover, and you have to wonder which one we're going to cover first. Is it affirmative action or the riots in France? And we're going to go with the riots in France as the first topic to discuss. We have three topics to discuss before we get to the cognitive elite questions, so be on the lookout for that. But the first topic is the riots in France. Really what we're seeing in France is their own version of the George Floyd revolution that happened here in America in 2020. But there are crucial differences there. And now, why is France erupting into chaos where you have rioters going around, burning down police buildings, schools, even trying to attack prisons to free the prisoners? There are real attacks on government institutions. There was a mayor's home who had, he was not there. It was in a suburb of France. And the rioters broke into the home and chased his family with his wife and his young children and were shooting fireworks at him, and the wife was severely injured in that attack. There's a lot of this going on, and they're laying siege to town halls where a lot of the local government is, and this is just spreading everywhere. Like, I've heard from some people in France who are saying that, they're not even a central area, not an area where there would even be the magical elements of French society coming through, and outside their apartment they're witnessing violence and chaos is going on. So it's spreading around, and you even had that a little bit in George Floyd revolution too, where there were random places all throughout America that were witnessing riots. For example, just in Virginia, pretty much every place in Virginia with more than 50,000 people, or even maybe 30,000 people, had riots and disturbances. Like in Manassas, Virginia, which is largely quiet suburb of DC, way outside of DC. It's like at least 30 minutes away if you're driving fast. And there were riots there. There were riots in Lynchburg. There were, the Newport News, Hampton Roads area. That's no surprise there are riots there. It's very magical there. But Richmond, there were riots. Very magical place anyway. But there were all throughout the country. All throughout the country, there were random places. Lynchburg was surprising because it's not that black. But they even had, things that could be counted as riots or aggressive protests. And it was just like the same. I knew, random places throughout the South, if anywhere, there's like a largely quiet mid-sized city with like 50,000 people, and they had, aggressive disturbances and some minor looting. So it really was happening everywhere you went. Very few places, unless they were very white and rural, like the Mountain West areas, Idaho, the Dakotas, and elsewhere, they didn't really have much rioting, and very white rural areas didn't have much. But anywhere where there were magical elements, anywhere there was a city of, at least 100,000 or more people, there was, violence and riots and aggressive demonstrations there. And so France is witnessing that in a similar degree. So what are the riots over? And similar to George Floyd, there is a George Floyd here, a man of long criminal record of dubious reputation who was killed by police while committing a criminal act, or while acting on suspicious behavior. The character, his name is Nahel M. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. It's like an Algerian youth who, even though he's only 17, he has a long criminal record. I think he has over 20 encounters with police by the time he is 17. So he's on his way to being a rocket engineer. But this incident is over, is that he was stopped by police, but he refused to comply. And in a chase with police, he allegedly endangered a cyclist and a pedestrian. And when they finally pulled him over, he's still refusing to apply, and a police officer shot him. Now, the police officer has been very, I'm sorry that I killed him. I'm very, being very apologetic about it. But of course, that's not doing nothing to quell the riots. And even when this first started with the riots, everyone was rushing out to condemn him. Similar to what happened with Derek Chauvin and Floyd. You had all these politicians lining up to condemn Chauvin. None of them changed their mind, but, Macron and most of the mainstream politicians were all coming out to saying, oh, this is outrageous. We will never accept this, that we kill police, and we can't allow this. People on the right, Marine Le Pen and others, Zemmour, have all been pretty solid on this issue. But initially they were. But due to how bad the riots are, people are changing their tone, which is a big difference from George Floyd's revolution. So I contacted some Frenchies to get some opinion on it, and one guy provided some very good details, and I promised I would highlight his account, even though I do have to respect his account. It's all in French. A lot of European nationalists all tweet, a lot of them tweet out in English. There's some Finns we've had on our podcast who tweet all in Finnish, but mainly they're in the online right sphere. But all the Frenchies all tweet solely in French. Like if they have an English language tweet, it's like once in a long time. Like even the big accounts like Damien Roux, he tweets only in French, but I did see him tweet in English to Elon Musk over Elon Musk's rate limiting. That's like the first time I've ever seen him. But this guy... you've got, Twitter translates his stuff. He highlights some other things, but I've connected with him before. And his account is Katsunan3000, and that's KATSUNAN 3000. So give him a follow. There's a lot of great French accounts. One thing is a problem with the French is that not a lot of these guys are connected with that international right-wing sphere. I think it's because, and I respect this, is they don't really like... they don't really like speaking English. They really insist on speaking French. And the whole international right-wing sphere, everything is in English. And so they don't really want to, share their language. There's a ton of Germans who are involved in the online right sphere. Eugipius, I think, is one of them. Some others, there's a lot of Germans who are involved, and so they'll tweet in English. They'll sometimes have some German tweets, but most of it's in English. And if you want to go and see what's going on in Germany, there's guys there. Same with Scandinavia and a lot of other places. But when it comes to the French, they're very insistent on speaking French, which... it's a separate topic. I do think a lot of the leftism comes how fluent your nation is in English and how much of your nation is like conducts its business in English, and whether all your music on the radio is in English. It is a sign you're about to be colonized. So one thing is like the French are a little bit better than a lot of other Europeans, I think, is their insistence on borrowing English usage and looking down on using English in their country. So it's something to respect. But I don't understand French at all. I can sort of read German, but I can't read French at all. But regardless, he provided some really good information on this, because it's hard for any of these news events, it's hard to find stuff on the ground, and you really have to go to these guys who are experiencing it and have our views there. And, I was wondering, hey, what do you think are the differences between the George Floyd revolution from you seeing it overseas versus what you're seeing there? And he was making the point that there is a much stronger backlash towards these riots in France than there were in America in 2020. He showed a poll to me that's saying that 70% of French support sending in the military. You have to remember is that sending in the military was incredibly controversial during the 2020 riots. Now, a slight majority did support sending in the military during the 2020 riots, but that was not reflected in the discourse at all, because only, it was like a 52% according to one poll I saw in June, or very early June, like the first week of June. But that was not how the people, and maybe you can blame media manipulation, but anytime there was a strong response to the riots, there was more backlash against the response than there was to the riots. Like, remember, Trump that weekend, I think it was June 1st, after a long week of riots and like destruction in D.C., he used a strong response, which wasn't even the military, because the military refused to be deployed by Trump. There was an effective coup against Trump where, Trump was like, I want to use the military. The military's like, you can't use us. And Bill Barr had to find like prison guards and even some guys who are like special forces volunteers to be this special riot squad to protect the White House from the rioters. And the rioters were right outside the White House, and vandalizing statues. They were even trying to take down an Andrew Jackson statue and other things, and causing chaos. And Trump Monday, dispersed them with a strong response and smoke grenades and all those things. I guess flash grenades would be the proper term, but standard riot control behavior, and that was like considered like fascism. Everyone was opposed to it. And even the people who are calling for lethal force against the rioters face more consequences than the rioters. There was an article published back in 2020 that highlighted all the South Carolina public employees. This is a red state who got fired. And there was like 24 people who were fired that they highlighted, and it could go down the list. There was like people who were like a janitor at a government facility or like a school teacher and all these types of people. And they were all fired for simply saying, shoot the protesters, shoot the riot. Well, no, they're not protesters, they're rioters. Shoot the rioters, like use lethal force. And people were fired over that. And of course, most rioters didn't even get arrested. You know, they were throwing Molotov cocktails, attacking police, let off without a scrap. And even if they were arrested, a lot of them were released, charges dropped. You know, most of the people who were arrested during the riots, and a lot of these cities, Minneapolis, elsewhere, you know, all the charges were dropped against them because it's politically unpopular to do so, at least in those locales. And even, you know, in comparison with, you could say that France is worse rioting because there's a lot of targeted government buildings, which I could say there were government buildings targeted during the riots. You know, the most famous example is the Portland Federal Courthouse, which was under siege, where they're throwing Molotov cocktails and stuff. And the media portrayed this as a justified response to evil Trump's fascist use of federal law enforcement to go after these rioters. And really, these federal law enforcement guys weren't doing, you know, much of anything besides crowd control while they're getting like pelted with rocks and like Molotov cocktails being thrown at this federal courthouse. And they're all like, oh, this is justified. They have a point. And then, you know, media was buying this stuff of like, oh, there's these moms outside who are protesting and there's no violence at all. All the violence is coming from the police. So police are instigating the violence, which became a meme during that time. But here they can't claim that in France. They can't claim that the police are instigating the violence. They clearly see like the worst criminal elements in France engaging in this behavior. And while a difference I saw between Floyd and the riots is that there were two elements within the Floyd riots that were going on, and they had different motives. If there was a lot of looting and not a lot of directed attacks on like government buildings, it was a black thing. You know, and you could have seen this is like Minneapolis had it when it was right. It had a mixture. You know, they did target, you know, a police building. I said they set a police building on fire in Minneapolis, and there was this mixture of the black element within the Antifa element. While there was also a ton of looting, but in some places where there's just looting, it was all blacks. Like Chicago had tons of looting throughout the summer. You know, there was just like a random time where they heard that some black guy got shot, and they all went into the ritzy part of downtown and were looting all these stores. And same in LA and elsewhere where there was just a ton of looting, which that was a primarily black thing. Like the blacks were not going after the police buildings and stuff. Antifa were. And so Portland, which was an almost entirely white affair, is where they were targeting government buildings and other places. And so there was this different element. Here, it's, you know, there are definitely Antifa elements, but I don't think that they're in the lead in the way that they were in America. I don't like to deny this element because that there's claiming that all the violence comes from white rioters, which was conservatives were trying to make this meme that's saying like, oh, we support Black Lives Matter and the blacks are just peacefully protesting, but it's all these white Antifa racists who are causing all the violence, which is not true. They just had different directions in where they were targeting. Here, I see that the non-whites who are involved in these riots are as equally concerned with looting as they are with attacking these symbols of the French regime, of the French people, which can go from government buildings, statues, elsewhere. They are equally committed to that. While when we saw the George Floyd riots, with some exceptions, the targets of the statues, police buildings, government buildings, it was an Antifa directing them. While like if they went to the nearest Target or CVS, that was the blacks involved. So anyway, that's what's going on. I should read the rest of the message because it's really good. It's very important. I think this is information that a lot of Americans aren't getting. So I talk about the poll, and he says that he goes on to say another nice white pill. The GoFundMe for the Copps family got almost €1 million in donations, much more than the one for Nahels, which is the dead North African teen. His family. The native Gaul seems to be getting tired of all this. politically, only the far left really defends the riots at this point, and even then, they're starting to backtrack a little bit. And this is true. To get off on point, is another huge difference is the police unions are released an incredibly keyed statement. Yes, some of the police unions were pretty good during the riots. I mean, the New York Police Union had this whole press conference saying where they can unfortunately condemn Chauvin and like he's bad, but they're like, we need support for our law enforcement, we need support for cops. And their police unions even took it up a notch. They're like, this government is doing nothing to help us. We are now the resistance against like chaos. And like this very right-wing statement that, and even some of the elements of the army are also making this. That's also another big difference is the military is very hostile to the riots. There's very strong right-wing elements in the French military. It's the same in most European militaries because, you know, there's in Europe there's like a kind of a, they don't really respect their troops as much as America does. So if you join the military, it's like a real way of saying I'm right-wing. Even though there's guys who join the military in America who are at least the white guys, generally perceived as being right-wing, but that's changing over time. Especially you can see this with polls. And the military leadership endorsed the riots. I mean, Milley endorsed the riots. There was the guy who's now the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who was an Air Force general. He released a statement endorsing Black Lives Matter. They were like, we're going to be more committed to Black Lives Matter. And even on the back end, the military refused to deploy it. And they're like, once again, this is fascism. We're not going to do this. Well, the military here in France seems to be more willing to be deployed, which their senior leadership is much more right wing than ours. And the police unions are on the same length as our police unions, but I think they're the statement released by their police unions is really like something written from like a movie. It was a very strong statement. It's a very powerful statement. Even though our police unions were generally good, they were not this off the rails keyed as the police unions. But going back to this Katsunen statement. And so he's saying the left wing. Macron started out throwing the police under the bus, but is now calling for calm by promising the largely immigrant suburbs more taxpayer money. Base Macron. We'll get into that in a moment on that meme. And it's hilariously blaming video games and social media for the violence. He knows his boomer audience very well. Oh, he must be reading National Review articles for why there's a crisis in them. It's all video games and social media dating apps. Several mayors have been physically attacked at this point, even the more pro-immigrant ones, which has almost never happened before. On the right, the Republicans, which is their largest center-right party, even though I think, no, they're the second largest party. National Front, well, now National Rally, which is Le Pen's party, is now, you know, neck and neck with them. And then there's Macron's center-left party. I forget the name of it, but it's the parties change names all the damn time in France. And his party was like a new creation that was essentially created for the 2017 presidential elections. But that's the largest party. The Republicans are the largest center-right party. So Republicans are having mixed reactions. Those elected, thanks in part to immigrant votes, are calling for more money for Dem programs. Others are calling for a state of emergency and making semi-keyed statements. Zemmour is calling this a race war. Le Pen is mostly silent like always. Actually, I've been seeing their statements, but as I said, Le Pen has been making better statements. But I think I think Zemmour's statements are much better than what I'm seeing. But once again, from American perspective, we see Le Pen saying stuff, but those guys in the French right wing may think that she's not saying enough. And you could have seen this when in America at that time when we were seeing Trump, we were all pissed off that Trump wasn't saying enough and doing enough during the initial stance of the riots. So I understand that perspective. It's something that we, as not living over there and not knowing French, may not understand. It's clear at this point that the state doesn't have this under control and can't do much to stop it under the current paradigm of cops not being able to shoot anyone and being told not to inflame tensions, at least. A lot of the rioters have military-grade weapons. Some have tried to break into prisons, and despite over 2,000 people being arrested and the RAID being deployed, most of them won't face serious consequences. Actually, I had to look up what the RAID is. It's an elite French police unit like the SWAT, but it's for the national police force. A lot of these European countries have national police forces. We don't. Well, I mean, FBI and other things, but not quite in their way. So that's being deployed out there, and they're having trouble with that, which is more than what was being used in America, where they didn't even want to deploy the military. And he's saying, meanwhile, the state is persecuting nationalists in Algiers for defending their headquarters from Antifa and North African mobs, which is something I didn't even know. I know that there's been video clips of nationalists taking the streets and fighting some of the rioters, which is also a big difference from America. Which, even though in America, there's been right-wingers have tried to retcon what happened in the riots of 2020, where, you know, it was such a black pill and defeat for them that they've now tried to revise it and saying that there were tons of examples of guys going up with AR-15s and, you know, intimidating away the rioters, which the only example they've ever proved was Coeur d'Alene, which Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, is a incredibly white area, and they probably weren't at fear of rioters, but there was like a small like left-wing demonstration there, and there were a bunch of like militia guys with guns, and there was that. I mean, there were some examples of like neighborhoods in the suburbs where some people formed like a patrol unit, and they were there. But how much of a risk of them having rioters and them coming there was minimal at best. I mean, the only real example besides Coeur d'Alene was Kyle Rittenhouse, where one guy was beaten up by an entire mob, and thanks to him having a long rifle, he was able to defend himself. But then he was put on, you know, he was arrested and charged with murder, which he thankfully beat those charges. And going on with the Katsunin statements, historically, what stopped riots like these were drug traffickers. Chaos is bad for business, and mobs. Tacit agreement with the state. They can do whatever they want in some regions. In exchange, they keep the Browns under control. This is what happened in 2005. This is also why, interestingly, some of the worst neighborhoods in Marseille, the northern districts, typically have low petty crime rates. The drug dealers control it completely. This could be seen in the beginning of the riots. Somehow the north of Marseille was spared. This recently started changing, though, and it seems that these two institutions have less control over the communities than they used to. Right now, things just seem to be winding down a bit. Supposedly, a fireman did die last night. I guess at some point, there's nothing left to burn and loot. Probable outcome, whites will be more awake. Browns will get, once again, more taxpayer money. Nothing new under the sun, though things could flare up back for any reason soon enough. Well, Katsunin has a little bit of a more black pill take, I would say. Or I don't want to say black pill, but a little bit of saying I don't think much will happen to this. I do think there is a awakened Gaul element here that there was not in America. First off, there are some things to realize about France. France has this real commitment to being a colorblind republic, that it doesn't see race at all. And it's very different from America, because America will sometimes, well, now we consider colorblind as white supremacy, and this is being taught in schools throughout the country. But here we're not supposed to see race unless non-whites are seeing race to complain about whites and demand more benefits from the government and special treatment from the government. So in America, you can't notice racial differences from a race realist angle. Like, race realism is not allowed here. But at the same time, this critical race theory is official state ideology. In France, both elements are frowned upon and not encouraged. Even though there's more punishment for race realism than there is for critical race theory, the public generally opposes it. And, you know, Macron and his, center-left ministers all attack le wokeism, which here in America, like, Biden and others are like, we love wokeness. Like, they love wokeness. Like, everyone in the Democratic Party is super supportive of wokeness. And even never Trumpers like David French and others like, oh, we love wokeness. While there, it's like their whole center element and center left element is also opposed to wokeness and tries to, curtail its popularity in the country. And there's been examples of like where, some popular speaker who's of non-white origin or a person of color, we could say, and they're spreading stuff that you would hear in a high school in America, and like they draw like mass protests and controversy, and people try to shut them down from speaking. And so they have this, like, they try to stay, well, we're just not going to see race from any perspective, whether it's the woke version of it or the race realist element of it. Because Zemmour has been prosecuted for hate speech over there, and so is Le Pen. Both her and her dad and several other people are constantly persecuted for hate speech and prosecuted by the government. But at the same time, it's not like the government is supporting the critical race theory stuff. And even the Macron government has come down on radical Islam in a way that our government never would. And, they're trying to curtail like these radical imams, and they really don't like these head coverings and burqas in public, and they try to restrict that. And that's even coming from the left and the right in there. It's only really like the far left that supports this stuff. But this doesn't really work because unlike in America, and even a lot of some French right-wingers that I've met in person who've come over to America will just say like, oh, French is, just about, a feeling, it's a mentality. Or sometimes they'll just say it's about being a Catholic, which even most like French people who are nominally Catholic don't even go to church. I think only like 5% of French Catholics regularly attend church. So it's, so they even not that. But even though this is what they say, by practice and stuff, there's, the French identity is strongly tied to ethnocultural differences. And these immigrants who've been there for a long time have never assimilated into France. There's nothing to, unlike with America where we have, I don't want to be too critical of America, but it is easier to assimilate to America because all you have to do is, watch Marvel movies, listen to rap, enjoy our pro sports, and, pursue money. That's really all you have to do. And speak English. I mean, these worries about having a bicultural America have largely dissipated into something worse, where most of our new immigrants are assimilating into a magical American culture, and that's what they're adopting instead of keep sticking to their Spanish or their Muslim roots or whatever. They instead adopt the new American identity, which is very different from the WASPy ideal, and that's very universalist. And so most of the time when Americans say they're like non-whites say they're alienated from America, it's just a bullshit reason to get in college and they write in their essay or to get sympathy points. They fully assimilate into America, or at least the new America. They're the blacks and the North Africans know that they can never be truly French. That being French means being a white person. And even though the French may say that's not true, there's this strong ethnic identity there that, the new immigrants just are never going to assimilate into. And this is what's coming to happen in France. And I think there is a type of white pill here. I'm not an accelerationist, but for French right-wingers have been predicting this for years, that these new elements are never going to assimilate, and they're going to be a violent, unstable element that could topple the country as it exists. And they're going to be a constant threat to the true French identity. And, this going back to Camp of the Saints, Wellebec, others, they've all been predicting this. Camus, not Albert Camus, but the one who came up with Great Replacement. So they've all been talking about this. And you need these elements to happen to showcase that this arrangement is not going to work. That this is the fruits of diversity. This is the fruits of mass immigration. And the colorblind republic ideal is not going to work because these people, no matter what you tell them, they're going to see color. They're going to see race on both sides. Like the French who may be speaking about this are like, oh, anyone can be French. They know at the end of the day that only really like a white Frenchman can be French. French identity is something tied to your heritage. And that's something recognized, and maybe not spoken out explicitly, but that's something recognized by both sides. That's certainly recognized by the immigrants who come here and they're like, fuck the French. And a lot of these riots are about like, fuck the French, like fuck this country, fuck these people. We are not a part of them. And we want this country to reflect what we look like, much less than the native population. And this event exposes it to the general public that the colorblind republic ideal of like all these people are going to come in and they're eventually going to become French is never going to work. They're always going to be like this. There's always going to be this chance for race riots. There's always going to be this possibility of these explosions. And the only thing that they can do to stop that is to end mass immigration and to ensure France stays French. And that doesn't mean some type of cultural values or secularism or whatever. It's about the people who built the country over 1,000 years. And that's not the new immigrants. And Europe is becoming more right-wing. The AfD in in Germany is gaining a lot of popularity. They're now getting 20% support in polls. They're winning mayoral elections. They are gaining in popularity. And in Germany, the whole political system is designed to not allow a party like that to get popular and to get seats. And they've and their version of the FBI is putting them under surveillance and saying they're an extremist group, and they have their equivalent of the FBI saying, don't vote for these guys, they're a threat to democracy. And even a majority of Germans say that they're a threat to democracy. Even 10% of AfD voters think they're a threat to democracy, yet they're still voting for them, or their idea of democracy. But the right is gaining in power. National Front or National Rally is now the third largest party in their parliament. And the Freedom Party, which everyone thought had been killed off in Austria over some scandals a few years ago, is now a very powerful party and is getting popularity. Same with Sweden and Sweden Democrats. You have the right-wing nationalist government in Italy, with Meloni, which there are problems there with them, but they're gaining in support. It's really just like the UK, where you're not seeing that right-wing support, but that's because the UK may be more similar to America, or the rest of the Anglosphere is like worse than America, and that's some of what you're seeing. But in Spain, like the right-wing party is also gaining in power and influence there. So you're seeing this all throughout Europe at the same time that the immigrant riots and their crime are showing that they're never going to assimilate, and these idiotic colorblind notions of everyone coming together and being French, being Spanish, being German is just a set of values is just not working out. And so all these dire predictions and threats warned about by all these right-wing thinkers are coming true in Europe. And this is different in America. I don't want to be, once again, this is not a black pill element in America, but I just want to bring this up when comparing the situation in Europe to the situation in America and what happened in 2020 versus what's happening in France right now. I think something positive can come out of this, and that it wakes up people. The 2020 riots did the opposite of waking up Americans. It was, there's been a lot of things to be blackpilled over in recent years, but the riots were just a mega black pill. And everyone always accuses me of being blackpilled and blah, blah, blah. But I really had to say, is like, one, there was not a backlash towards them. It didn't really figure into the 2020 elections. And if there was any backlash, it was to the media portrayed it as like police violence and Trump being evil and bad and hurting peaceful protesters. And both sides were able to retcon what the riots were about. The left thinks that they were all peaceful. The 93% of protests were peaceful. That bullshit study that they love to talk about back then and even afterwards. They all think they were peaceful. The right likes to think that, these based ruralite militias took down the rioters and that there was no riots at all. And there were several times they were standing up. And like I said, the only examples they have, real examples besides my cousin heard in rural Alabama, there was going to be a BLM riot, and then the militias took them out and disappeared them. And it's like, well, I'm sure this is true. Your cousin is exactly right. That's pretty much the only examples, is that just like anecdotes backed up with no evidence. The only examples they have is Coeur d'Alene, which there was no real riot threat. There was just some protesters, very white area, largely conservative area, wasn't under threat. And then Kenosha, where Rittenhouse got, beaten up and he had to defend himself against the rioters. That was it. And other examples, and people, they were able to take control of all the cities and all the places that mattered and run their own checkpoints, as what happened in Houston or in Austin with Daniel Perry, not to be confused with Daniel Penny, where this guy, they were running a checkpoint, and a guy was threatening him with a rifle, and Perry, who was an Army sergeant, took him out, and he got charged and convicted with murder. So there was nothing, and there was total support for it. Unlike in France, there's not like a Black Lives Matter type thing where the majority of the population supports. 2/3 of the population supported Black Lives Matter at the height of the riots. So the riots, there was a front lash, instead of a backlash where, people are like, we hate this, we hate the riots, which is what happened in the 60s. support for the civil rights movement declined with rising violence. Like the riots turned people off to the civil rights movement and their demands. Complete opposite with the riots, the 2020 riots. It made everyone support their demands and everyone come out and support for them, you know, changing their Instagram to black squares and stuff. And I even saw this on an anecdotal perspective is like, you know, I went to Facebook expecting to find, you know, and I have largely, or I no longer have Facebook. I have largely conservative, you know, people I knew, you know, as people back in Tennessee, you know, it's not like libtards. And I go in there and the responses are just horrible. You know, even when people condemn the violence, they had to be like, I support peaceful protest. I condemn police brutality. I think it's so awful what happened to blacks. But please don't destroy businesses. Please stay peaceful. And that's pretty much the only type of like condemnation I would see. Most other people were writing these essays about how they stand with Black Lives Matter and putting Black Lives Matter shit all over their profile and stuff. And so like the whole American public, you know, believed in this stuff at the height of the violence. And it didn't factor into the election. You know, all these Trump supporters were saying, oh, well, there's going to be a backlash to the election. And it really didn't figure that much into the election at all. I mean, Trump's response, I mean, Trump was like handcuffed in what he could do. I mean, the military didn't want to respond. He had to find like prison guards and others. That's when he sent a national response to Portland because the Portland police were not doing anything because, you know, they were having a French situation like there. Antifa was going and harassing the mayor at his residence, like at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, banging drums and shining a light into his apartment building, all this stuff. And Portland police were standing down. So they had to send like federal law enforcement there and they had to find like border patrol and prison guards to go and protect the federal courthouse. And everyone condemned it. It was very unpopular because they're like, oh, the police are instigating the violence. And they're totally ignoring. And the media was completely, it wasn't just the far left. It was like the entire center left was on the side of the rioters. Like they portrayed those Portland rioters, those ones laying siege to the courthouse, as heroes, which is funny because just a few months later, when people entered the Capitol without permission, you know, they were turned into terrorists, but the people throwing Molotov cocktails at the federal courthouse were heroes. And the unfortunate factor is that most of the American public bought this shit. And there was no, you know, and some of this is because the idea of black worship, of Afrolatry is so embedded within the American public that, you know, they'll just believe this stuff anyway. They believe that blacks are the only reason the high crime rates happen is and they're largely done by blacks, disproportionately so, is because of racism in the criminal justice system. Police are racist. Judges are racist. The whole system is racist. That's the only reason why. And most of these people are innocent victims that were picked up and they didn't really do anything wrong. And among Americans, there's this idea, especially among, you know, white, you know, Anglo stock, or just the normal white Americans, you know, there's no feeling of ethnic identity among them. You know, sometimes they'll say like, well, I'm an Italian, I'm Polish, I'm Irish, but there's no real solid identity there for most people, unless they come from a recent immigrant community, like, you know, maybe they did live in an Italian neighborhood, or some of these Slavic, you know, like the Ukrainians and Russians who live in a Ukrainian-Russian neighborhood, you know, they have a strong ethnic identity. But that's not the case for most white Americans. You know, there's no strong ethnic identity there. They truly believe the assimilated, everyone can be an American, nation of immigrant stuff. They generally believe that, even if they're far right. You know, there's always this example I bring up of this congressman, Troy Nehls, who's one of the most right-wing congressmen there is. And they were talking to him about immigration, and he's like talking about how much he loves his Pakistani doctor. And he's like, we love immigrants here in Texas. And this is like one of the most right-wing congressmen there is. And he's saying that stuff. And National Rally members would not be saying that stuff in France, and AFD members would not be saying that stuff in Germany. Even very liberal Europeans have a sense that there is something unique about Germans or French that not everybody can belong to. There is this inherent, you know, that identity is based on ethnocultural differences. While here in America, it's pure ideology, and as long as you enjoy the NFL and Marvel movies and rap music, you're just as American as anyone else. And, some people, don't believe in that, but the majority of Americans believe in that. And going back to the point of the 2020 election, it did not factor at all. Like, it might as well just not happen. It had no real effect on the election. I do think it inspired the Stop the Steal protests because there was so much anger over the fact that Black Lives Matter was able to destroy cities with impunity that all these people are like, well, and some of that got mixed into with the election and how it went. And people just felt like this country was being rigged against them and not in their favor. And so a lot of people were outraged, and that's what inspired a lot of those protests. But the election itself, no. There was a delayed backlash against critical race theory and this anti-white racism in schools. But that's all that, a lot of that energy has been misdirected, or I don't know if misdirected is the right word, but directed towards drag queens and transgender stuff entirely. Not saying, as I always say, like, not that stuff isn't bad as well, but it's taken away all the energy and focus on the racial and identity stuff and just being solely focused on that. So one thing is, like, I hope we don't have a Floyd-like summer ever again, because for accelerationists here, it's accelerating us into cringe, into, like, it really exposes the weaknesses in America and American identity and how Americans view these things when we have those events. Because everyone's just going to rally behind, the new sob story. Everyone's going to believe the media. Most people are going to believe the media lie. There's not going to be real opposition on the ground and stuff. And even if you had like nationalist groups challenging them, like everyone thinks these nationalist groups, even though a lot of them are idiots here in America, everyone thinks they're feds and should be, and they would probably be supporting the rioters attacking them than they would the guys challenging them. So there's just all these things, and it does so that's why I'm very optimistic about how France will change. And the fact of this is it will undermine Macron as him being this base guy. There's still a number of right wingers who are like, oh, he's so awesome. He's base because he's Jupiter and he's wanting a united Europe, and maybe he says some nice things about Russia and China. And then in reality, he can't control the situation, and it undermines his authority. And I think this will hurt him and his party in future elections. And this could pave the path for really what would be the biggest victory in Europe, is for a nationalist to become the next president of France. And that would be such a massive victory. That would be bigger than... I would definitely be bigger than Brexit. And there would be very little possibility of that turning into stupidity or just a failure, complete failure like Brexit. And I think it would rival Trump's victory in 2016, but may even be bigger, because that would make a huge signal. You just got to hope that nationalist is better than Meloni in Italy. But stuff like this can lead to that, and you really want that type of development where nationalists are coming into power and to the countries that matter in Europe. Italy is one of the countries that matter, but unfortunately Meloni isn't quite the leader you want. You see the Eastern European countries, but they have their own little narrow concerns, and they're not in the driver's seat in Europe. Once you have the country, if you had France or Germany elect a nationalist leader, a nationalist government, that would be a massive victory and a massive step in the right direction. And you need these events like this to prove right-wingers right about what's happening in their countries and the grim future of their countries in order to achieve the results you have. But it'd be different here in America because of a lot of the delusions and fantasies we have as Americans and the lack of an ethnic identity or racial awareness among whites here, and also just the ever-present Afrolatry within our country and our society, even found among right-wingers. And you have to change those attitudes for these types of events to move people in that direction that you want. And so over time, I hope we don't have a 2020 revolution. Not just because it was bad, it's like the massive damage, but it had the opposite effect of you want. If you compare the 60s riots, if you even compare the riots of the mid-2010s, where that really helped Trump get elected, and that really did wake up a lot of people to the racial problems in America, the identity problems in America. The 2020 riots were not that. It really blue-pilled more Americans than red-pilled them, from what we perceived. So That's my thoughts on the revolutions, on the riots going on in between them. I think it's really awful and terrible what's happening in France. It's really the most important news story happening in the world today, especially to our interests. But I do think that there is an element of that this will wake up the Gaul, the Frenchman to what's happening to his country and make them want to support people who will actually try to solve the problem rather than bullshit about the problem like Macron. And I don't see it as the same thing happening with America with the George Floyd revolution, which is one of the greatest black pills to have in our country, which it's not saying like everything is over in America, but I think people need to be honest about what happened there and the consequences for that, and to be honest about it rather than trying to imagine that there were all these rural militias that came and stopped the riots dead in their tracks. But for some reason, even though the media is obsessed with right-wingers being dangerous terrorists, they completely ignored that story, which I don't think it does us any favors to lie and delude ourselves into those fantasies. So that's it. We spent a lot of time on that, so I've got to go to the affirmative action ruling. Before we begin, I should note that this is how different America is from Europe. A lot of Europeans come over here and a lot of foreigners come over here and can't believe that we have this affirmative action example. It's more maybe the East Asians and others who just like can't understand that. They're like, you hire based on race and you'll just hire less qualified people simply to satisfy a quota. And that's like, yes, that's how we operate our universities. That's how we operate our businesses. That's how we operate in America. And they just like can't believe this. Like affirmative action would be an idea that would be very unpopular in France. But here it rules the land. But now the Supreme Court has chipped at it a little bit. And in a ruling last week, they overturned officially including race as a factor in college applications. Now, it did offer a loophole. It said that like the lived experience of race can be used in essays, which it'll probably be used by colleges to figure out a way around it. Now, I would say this is a victory because, you know, it gives the opportunity for us to advance the agenda that we want and to chip away at these racial quota system and the affirmative action system. And I think when it comes to red state universities, you know, red public universities in red states, it is going to be massively implemented. Like affirmative action is going to be effectively dead in those states because, you know, if the state government finds out their universities are getting around it, they can come down on them hard. So places like Tennessee, Arkansas, Alabama, Kansas, Nebraska, you know, affirmative action is just not going to be there anymore. And these schools are going to be pretty much overwhelmingly white. And then, so that's a good thing. But at the elite universities, at the critical elite universities, the Ivy Leagues, Stanford, you know, those schools are in public universities in blue states, right? The best public universities in blue states. They're going to figure out loopholes around this. And they've already done this a little bit with California, but they've had trouble getting enough blacks and Hispanics into the elite state universities in California. But while that's the case, whites are disappearing from their elite universities. It's you know, this is a figure from 2021, and I saw it was like even lower. But whites only make up 20% of the University of California education system, and at the best universities, it's already under 20%. And whites are not under 20% of the population in California. They're still like 36% of the population, 36, 37%. Yet they're under 20% at their best schools of the population. So, but Asians are like 40% of the students at most of these universities, and whites are barely at their best universities, and whites are barely there. And they complain that like, oh, we're not accurately reflecting the demographics of how many Hispanics and blacks we have. But you know, it's happening that it's like 20%. And so that's like, so they'll figure out a way at these best universities to ensure fewer whites are going, because while affirmative action is happening, you know, the official rules allow for truly a merit-based approach to education to occur, which would benefit whites. We're living in a very different climate from what could have been the ruling 20 years ago. When 20 years ago they ruled on affirmative action, if that had happened then, it'd been a much better climate for this to occur. We were not living in this incredibly anti-white environment, and Afrolatry was still there, but not as like ever present. So what's going to happen to these elite universities? They'll figure out ways to eliminate the standards, whether they'll no longer account for SAT or ACT in their admissions. It'll all be about the written essay, and the written essay will just be like, and sure, you talk about your race. And so somebody who's like, I'm white, rejected. And then somebody's like, I'm black, and this informs everything. It's like, oh, accepted. And that's probably what we're going to see at a lot of the elite universities. Of course, there's going to be lawsuits over this. Of course, there's going to be litigation over this. But we're operating in an environment that is hostile to whites, that is, worships diversity and demands more diversity in all aspects of life. And so it's not going to have quite the effect it would have had if this had been implemented 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. So colleges are already trying to remove the standards, the SAT standards and everything else along with that as a result of the George Floyd revolution in order to increase diversity and increase the proportion of their black and Hispanic students long before this ruling. And now this is just going to accelerate that trend. So they're going to eliminate the standards just to have more of those minorities. And it'll benefit Asians, because what I think is going to happen is that a lot of these universities are just going to give their admissions, what would have otherwise gone to white students, they'll just give them to Asians. So most of these Ivy League universities are about 20% Asian. They'll probably go up to 30 or 35% Asian. And most of those spots are going to be taken from white students. Now, litigation could do wonders for this. I mean, there could be that there's a fight in the lower courts and eventually the Supreme Court has to rule and they give a more definitive, like, you cannot consider race at all, and gives them fewer loopholes. And then we have this development. And that's like very good. I think the Supreme Court is ruling and is making a lot of rulings that if they had happened 20 years ago, they would have really done wonders for our country. The problem is that at a cultural level, at a social level, America has experienced a lot of negative changes, and a lot of this emanates from the George Floyd revolution and how we approach racial matters. And it's the same even with a lot of the state governments that are trying to ban DEI training and stuff. But it is in every business now. Like, if you work for a company that has multiple locations or anything, or just like is a sizable company that's more than just like a mom and pop store or an independent proprietor, you're going to have to go through DEI training. You're going to have to go through that. And there's a lot of back and forth over this, but this is an effect of the George Floyd revolution. Is now every employee has to learn about how they're bad because they're white and how they have white privilege and to avoid microaggressions. And it goes even to public schools and stuff, where there's been some positive development to eliminate that stuff, but at the same time, that stuff is still seeping in under another name. And universities have the worst example of this mentality of this anti-whiteness and this desire, this cult of diversity that has taken over. And it's really most present in universities. And now we're telling them like, oh, hey, you can't see race. You've got to base on merit. You got to pick students on merit, which is going to overwhelmingly favor white and Asian students. And I don't think they mind Asian students that much that's coming in, because conservatives use Asians as a proxy for this, because they know they can't, or they feel uncomfortable about highlighting how this harms whites. And generally, whenever you see mainstream conservatives talk about affirmative action, they just talk about how it hurts Asians. They don't talk about how it hurts whites. They just and one of the lawsuits, I think it was the Harvard lawsuit, didn't even mention how this discriminates against whites. It's just how it discriminates against Asians. The UNC lawsuit also included whites in that, I believe. But the Harvard one that was a part of this ruling it was a lawsuit against Harvard and a lawsuit against UNC, and they're both included in this. The Harvard one was just about Asians and how they discriminate against Asians. And there's even been these leftists who have made, I think, points that have some accuracy, saying that conservatives are using Asians as a shield to push for an agenda to this. Now, they say they're using this agenda to only help out whites, but really, in fact, it's not helping out whites that much. It's going to help out Asians far more than it's going to help out whites. And they even did this with school standards in Virginia and elsewhere, where there was very highly competitive high schools to get into, and they were discriminating against Asians. There was one high school, I think it was Thomas Jefferson High School in Virginia, very competitive high school to get into, and all the conservatives were complaining about how, under their new diversity standards, there were more white students attending, and they're like, this is racist and white privilege, and they're hurting Asians. And that's just what we have to deal with when this comes out. So we're operating in a weird country right now, and a weird society where it demands affirmative action, but the court says that it's illegal. Or at least the institutions that matter. I mean, the public opinion against affirmative action, it's always been a majority against it. And even in California, they had the option of scrapping their ban on affirmative action in universities. And even though it's a very liberal state and whites are no longer a majority there, the population still voted to keep the ban on affirmative action. So it's very, the people are have the right opinion, but the institutions are even more insistent and more desiring this effect. And even with the public who can convince them that, like, you need this to encourage diversity, they still think that diversity is like a highest good and is a great thing that you need to succeed in modern life. So it's hard. So it's going to be hard with us. But this will be it's still a victory because it opens up the opportunities to do some positive things. It just needs to be worked out in the courts, and it'll be worked out on the state level. So I think that in the immediate term, it's going to have a massive benefit for whites in red states, where now, if they got rejected from, say, Texas or Florida, these Georgia, these very competitive, really good public state universities, and they got rejected simply because they needed added more diversity. Now those students have an opportunity to go to those universities and not be rejected because of the color of their skin. But when it comes to the very elite universities or elite private universities that aren't as much under control of these red state legislatures, there's going to be this battle that's going to take place in the courts, and they're going to try to find loopholes around it. I think it's be harder for those red state public universities to find loopholes around it, especially when the state legislature is monitoring it and other means. But and the deans there have to please the state legislature too. So it'll be interesting to see. It'll be worked out. I still think it's a victory, but you have to keep in mind the mentality that rules our elites at this moment, and it's guided by anti-white racism, and it's guided by this desire for more diversity. And so these elite universities are going to try to achieve that level of diversity and ensure they have fewer white students by any means necessary. And that's why it's up for lawfare is so important, and that's why we need to hope that eventually a ruling comes out that firmly kills affirmative action and allows for the opportunity to start challenging affirmative action hiring practices, which is getting even worse because there's so many of these companies that now state, we won't hire whites, or we're trying to achieve this barometer of diversity, like we want all our managers to be, a third of our management to be non-white, and all these standards. And hopefully this creates the precedent to start targeting that stuff, which would be a huge victory if, those type of quotas that a lot of these companies are pursuing are then found to be unconstitutional and have to be eliminated. So that's both a win and a loss at the time. There's some other things to go on, but we've had I spent so much time in the French riots. I mean, the most funny thing is Ketanji Brown Jackson's opinion, which all these liberals are soy jacking over. There is a point where she's saying, and this is kind of the color blindness versus race essentialism. I guess that's one way of describing it. And the colorblind position was articulated by Clarence Thomas, and the left-wing race essentialist mentality was expressed by Ketanji Brown Jackson. In her dissent, she said, I'll read it because it is like stupid. People are like, this is so brilliant, but it is like stupid, even though if it was said from a right-wing perspective, I would agree with it, but it's said from a left-wing perspective. So she says, with let them eat cake obliviousness. Oh, they love sounding smart. Today, the majority pulls the ripcord and announces colorblindness for all by legal fiat. But deeming race irrelevant in law does not make it so in life. And so she talks about other things, and then she goes, no one benefits from ignorance. Although formal race-linked legal barriers are gone, race still matters to the lived experience of all Americans in innumerable ways. And today's ruling makes things worse, not better. And the point of that, we can't ignore race, and race does matter to the lived experiences of all Americans, minus whites who just they have the luxury of feeling of not understanding race. I guess you could say it's a luxury. It's both a luxury and a shortcoming. You could say I view it as more of a shortcoming, but they can just why care about race? I'm just living my life, and that's what a lot of white Americans are. But you can't ignore race. But the thing is what she's meaning is that we need to account for race to have more racial wealth redistribution and have racial quotas and have all these bad things that hurt the majority of Americans at the benefit of minority Americans. So we are not a fan of that. But with Clarence Thomas, he's like, these race essentialist ideas are not there. We should just focus on merit and all these things. And I think you would agree with that instinctually because the outcomes are the policies that Thomas's argument is making would benefit us. Even though what he's saying on a philosophical level is probably more at odds with an identitarian worldview than the worldview of Ketanji Brown Jackson. But that worldview of Ketanji Brown Jackson is about ensuring that fewer of us go to universities, that we're more discriminated against in admissions and in the workplace, and our kids are being taught to hate themselves and that they need to learn about white privilege. And that's what she means about her type of identitarianism versus Clarence Thomas's colorblindness, which would lead to lots of great benefits. It would ensure that we're not discriminated against in the workplace, that we're not discriminated against in universities, and that a colorblind America would actually benefit whites. But at the same time, as we're seeing in France, a colorblind ideal doesn't always work because obviously reality is going to look in. But for America, it's better than the alternative of Ketanji Brown's, Jackson's identitarianism where it essentially boils down to anti-white racism. So that's just something to consider. That's something probably a topic I need to broaden about and maybe write an article about than this. But it's always a time with these podcasts. I have one topic that I dedicate all my energy and all my willpower to, and then those other topics I have a ton of stuff to talk about, but I use up all that time on that one topic, and I made that great. So I had to keep this briefer about the affirmative action thing, but we're going to talk about this and write about this a lot more in the future. So this issue is not going away. But these are just my initial thoughts on what could happen there. And so the third topic before we get into the Common Elite questions is the weird DeSantis gay pride ad that he released on Twitter. The DeSantis War Room released on Twitter last week. Now, the DeSantis campaign, I've always said it's an extremely online campaign, and this video really captures it. They've been trying to utilize meme culture, right-wing meme culture for their benefit, and particularly a lot of these online right-wing stuff. They've been trying to imitate this, for lack of a better term, these Panther Den style videos. Some people may not remember Panther Den, but Panther Den was making very popular meme videos in 2019, 2020. They were very much in the style, and people really liked them. Some of them had some questionable optics in them, but we still see a lot of these videos today. There's still a lot of these guys who do it, but generally there's kind of an absurdist element to that because it'll be, like Michael Scott from The Office with like dyed blonde hair and lightning blue eyes with like a sun and red coming out, and you're like, what the hell is this? But there's like this absurdist element to it that makes it funny to a lot of these videos. And here they're trying to incorporate that for a political campaign, which it doesn't really work as a normal political campaign. And it's a direct imitation of these videos with eliminating a lot of the absurdist element or a lot of the over-the-top element and trying to direct it into a standard political ad, which it's very weird for a political ad. Now, they've been trying to do this before, but it's very weird to outsiders because they're consciously trying to imitate those right-wing meme smiths. And so there was this one video where Pedro Gonzalez, who actually we're going to have a little bit of sidetrack. I did talk about a lot of this on my IQ supplement last week, but I do have to talk a little bit about this, especially with this video coming out, is that Pedro, in his long essay on why he was thinking dangerous thoughts or thinking troublesome thoughts. He blamed all his racism and anti-Semitism on Trump and these Trump culture, and that he left the darkness. He returned to the light through Ron DeSantis. There's a lot of odd things about his response, but I'll leave those unsaid. I think most listeners will understand that. But when it comes to his argument for why he was saying these things, which some of them weren't that bad, some of them were probably things you don't want to speak out in public, but, you know, it's whatever. And sometimes it appeared that he was trying too hard to please the group chat that he was saying these things in, and that's why he said them. But otherwise, like, you know, it's probably indicating he genuinely believed this stuff. But he would just say, like, oh, it's all due to Trump that I believe this stuff is all because of racism and this evil, hateful online subculture that I left. Well, he's saying this. He's at the same time this campaign is trying to rip off that subculture and use them for their ads, which is very weird because they don't want that support, or they sort of want that subculture support, while they're at the same time condemning it. And there's weird things about these videos. I mean, they've been doing this for time. I mean, as I said, there's a Pedro time where like the Zoomer DeSantis edits are getting really good when they're made by some guy working at the Never Back Down super PAC. They're not genuine Zoomer edits. The first time they did this, it was really lame. It really did not get the aesthetics at all. The second time, there was a video of like DeSantis and Casey, and they have the Drive music playing, which once again doesn't understand what the subculture would use the Drive music for. It was not to showcase this like standard suburban marriage, which I've kind of understood this when like mainstream right-wingers try to take stuff from the dissident right. They don't really quite understand this. I highlighted this one example in the IQ supplement. Well, when Claremont once did a podcast on Bronze Age Pervert, a lot of people in the audience aren't going to like him, but whatever your thoughts on Bronze Age Pervert, just listen to how they don't understand Bronze Age Pervert. And they say the meaning of BAP is that it's about having your kids run around the neighborhood unsupervised. That is not the meaning of BAP. That's not the meaning of dissident right at all, but they incorporate this stuff to just like standard mainstream right concerns. So they take the Drive music, which is supposed to be, when those videos are done, they're trying to, you know, indicate a type of dark individualism in our modern world. Like you're listening to that music and you're driving along and seeing the filth and degeneracy around you, and you're keeping cool, you're keeping your stoicism, which is what a meaning of a lot of those videos are. Here it's just like highlighting a standard like middle class marriage, and that's not like the point of the music. That's not the point of those videos. And now it gets even worse with this latest video where they did try to do a direct imitation of this stuff with like the menacing electronic music and these like these flash shots and like everything cutting across, and like there's all these figures being included in it, and it's about attacking Trump for supporting Pride Month. And in this video it highlights Trump like doing I guess LGBT events, and then Lady MAGA. I think Caitlyn Jenner is in there, and then they say like have a video of like Trump like, I don't care what bathroom Caitlyn Jenner uses, and then it showcases like DeSantis like no, and then there's like Tyler the Creator that shows up. It's like ha, and then Achilles from Troy is in there, and then Patrick Bateman is in there, and it's like the menacing electronic music, and the impression is that Trump is pro-gay and DeSantis is anti-gay. And that's the one message to get. Now, this is at odds with what DeSantis is actually for. DeSantis, if you ever asked him, he'd be like, I am not anti-gay, I'm anti-groomer. And also the ad hits Trump for, you know, honoring the people killed at Pulse nightclub, when just last month, DeSantis ordered all flags in the state to be flown in half-mast to honor Pulse nightclub. Just last month. I mean, maybe there was a sudden change in the last few weeks, but I doubt it. And he did this. And you know, like that's a little bit strange, especially with this ad where he's supposedly wanting to ban homosexuality in this. And at the same time, DeSantis has like gay surrogates, you know, like Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin is one of the biggest backers of DeSantis. And he's obviously gay. He's in a gay marriage, and he's got surrogate kids that he just highlighted. And DeSantis bought his surrogate kids onesies. if this guy is supposedly anti-gay, then what would be that way? And there's been other news articles saying this. It was like, there's a news, I think it was the New York Times, is showing that, DeSantis said, like, just a few years ago, like, we need to move on from the LGBT issues and focus on other matters. And he wasn't, like, even that hard on this issue, but he's now getting into this issue, partially because of conservative media, this is their main focus, and he feels he can outflank Trump. But the only way he can outflank Trump is by returning to a 1990s position of, like, homosexuality should be, which was like common among conservatives, and there are still states where homosexuality was officially illegal in the 20th century, in the late 20th century, where it should actually be banned, and we're going to overturn gay marriage, which is not DeSantis' position at all. Like, DeSantis opposed that gay marriage legalization bill on the national level, not because he opposed gay marriage, that he said it should be illegal, just because he felt that it was a threat to religious freedom. There was no argument he made saying that actually gay marriage should be illegal. That's not what he said. And he supports Dave Rubin's marriage and his strange family. That's so on a personal level, he's not even doing that. And on a political level, he's not doing that. And his whole focus is just on groomers. It's not on gays in general. That's like, so this ad goes far beyond what's DeSantis' status position. Now, it'd be normal if this was just done by a fan account, like if there's just like a random meme lord or something who made this video, and that's understandable. But this is put out by the official campaign and like are endorsed, and the people are like, well, it's made by this guy, and this guy's not a part of the official campaign, but DeSantis War Room shared it. And, this would have been like Trump campaign sharing the gas chamber memes from 2016, which they were not doing. But that's like, you're about to see like DeSantis have like their own gas chamber memes, but instead of a Nazi uniform, it'll be like a World War II uniform, because they're trying to eliminate the racist and the really offensive stuff by copying the template and the spirit of it, but it's like a forced, inauthentic spirit to it. And so this like video comes out, and so it's not even stating DeSantis' position. Largely, for the most part, outside of some few rhetorical things that Trump has said in the LGBT or favor, or thinking the Disney boycott, the focus on Disney is not that important. Their position on gay issues is largely the same. Virtually the same. They both oppose like teaching the stuff in schools. They both oppose. They both have support for, ensuring the surgeries aren't happening to kids. It's largely the same. So it's the only way that he can outmaneuver Trump is by saying that he's the truly anti-gay politician, which he's not saying at all. And even their supporters were coming in and doing damage control after this, saying like, oh, well, DeSantis is not anti-gay. He's just anti-groomer. And so the video didn't even reflect his own views. And the second problem with this video is that the vast majority of GOP voters aren't going to get it. And that's the audience for this. It's not they're trying to unite the both online sphere, right sphere, and the normie offline right sphere. And both sides didn't like this video. Like the normie sphere, like the boomers are like, what the hell is this? Like, why is Brad Pitt in this? Like, what's that? What's that guy who played Batman doing it in a suit? I don't understand this. Like, what's this weird music? Well, I don't get this. They're going to be very confused by it. And they're like, I don't get this at all. And then the online right knows it's lame and authentic, that it's done by super PAC consultants and not done by ordinary people or ordinary meme lords. So they're not going to like that either. And the left just finds it very weird. And then they're saying like this is an explicitly anti-gay ad, which they're saying that it's taking a position that DeSantis himself doesn't even take. So it's like, what's the positive effect of this? Well, the positive effect is that the online rapid response team that thinks everything DeSantis does is amazing, from his failed Twitter Space announcement to, his gaffes and his sweating through his shirt, and they just think that everything he does is awesome. They thought this is amazing, and this really connects to the Zoomers, which it didn't at all. It's just connecting with these Gen X surrogates he has who are going through a midlife crisis, and they think this makes them young and relevant. And so it's a very strange ad, but it really illustrates the problem with his DeSantis' extremely online campaign. It's going to make him take stances that are appealing to a narrow demographic, or trying to win over that demographic of people online that most people are just, that's not their stance on these issues, or they just simply don't care about this stuff. You could have even seen this in his Twitter space where he's just talking in these really in the weeds wonkery about ESG and stuff, which the average person's like, what? And like it was like a really boring think tank podcast that was happening. And so that's not what people are really into. Second off, it's not reaching the people he needs to actually win over to win a GOP primary, and it's not that narrow demographic of online right people. It's about winning over the boomers and the Gen Xers who are offline. They're touching grass and they have their own concerns. And DeSantis has a lot of trouble winning them over because you have to win over them through your personality. You can't just depend on conservative media to create this fantasy image of yourself, which is what DeSantis is hoping is going to win. But the real person is this dorky guy who's like, hi, I'm Ron DeSantis. I don't like ESG. And that's what he talks. He's not going to win over that audience. If you showed this video to any of those people, they would just go, what the fuck? I don't understand this at all. This is some strange ass shit. And they're not the target audience for this. DeSantis is trying to fall into the Blake Masters campaign path, which I really like Blake Masters, but Blake Masters was a little bit too concerned with what people online said him. And even like the places he was doing interviews and stuff, it's like Alex Kashuta and other places, which is probably fine for like other people to go for, but it's probably, if you're like a Senate candidate, may not be the best place for it. And he's talking about how he liked Ted Kaczynski and stuff, which is not an appealing thing to say in a Republican primary, but it is a thing to win over the online right. DeSantis isn't even going that far with stressing interesting ideas. He's just stealing our stuff and just hoping that by stealing his stuff and making a lamer version of it, that's going to win us over, which it's not. And it's also confusing the actual people he needs to win over. But he's having troubles like outflanking Trump, and he's hoping the LGBT issue is where it's at. But there's a very thin line of where conservatives are. Conservatives are in a weird place on this issue because they're very hostile towards trans, and there is some development where they are no longer seeing gay relationships as morally acceptable. But at the same time, they do see gays as different from trans. I mean, yes, I know it's weird, but that's how they think. And going full into the anti-gay stuff is, one, going to be very bad for a general election, regardless of what your opinion of this is. And it might not even work for a Republican primary. And it's not even where DeSantis himself wants to go, but he feels that he just has to outflank Trump on the right. But it doesn't matter how much he outflanks Trump on the right. It's like those people who are most right-wing have an emotional attachment to Trump regardless of his actual politics. They just see him as their leader and their avatar. And he's even having this issue with immigration. While the conservative media was talking about how DeSantis' immigration plan is the toughest imaginable, it's virtually the same as Trump's. Virtually the same as Trump is what Trump's presidential when he was president, his policies. It's like, we're going to eliminate catch and release. Trump did that. We're going to impose remain in Mexico. Trump created that. We're going to defund sanctuary cities. Trump's DOJ tried to do that, and it got overturned and it got blocked by the courts, which you can say, oh, well, DeSantis will arrest the judge. No, he won't. He's going to have the same issues. Anything he suggests, it's, more these things that he's going to have the same troubles of doing with Trump. The wall. Wall was opposed by a lot of Republicans, a lot of Democrats, and Trump had to declare a national state emergency to get funds from the Defense Department to build a wall. He could have done it earlier, but he did it. And a lot of the things he's pointing out, DeSantis points out that the problems with the wall is due to Biden no longer building the wall. If he had another term, the wall could have been built. So there's really no difference. And either way, Trump has an advantage on immigration. And also, neither Trump or DeSantis is mentioning legal immigration so far. So that's one way that DeSantis could outmaneuver Trump, but he knows that it will piss off some of his donors and the important Cuban lobby that he needs a base of support in Florida. So he's not going to call for legal immigration. He could down the line, but so far he hasn't. But Trump stands out he makes this clear on two issues. He says he's going to issue an executive order to eliminate birthright citizenship, which is pretty much the only way we're ever going to have a chance at eliminating birthright citizenship, while DeSantis is a little bit more mealy-mouthed about it and says we're just going to do something through Congress, which Congress is never going to eliminate birthright citizenship. The only way you can do this is doing an executive order and sending it to the courts, and maybe the courts find that, not affirmative action, but birthright citizenship is not actually spelled out in the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment says something different, and it does not extend to the children of illegal immigrants. That's the only way to do that. And Trump calls for mass deportation, which DeSantis doesn't call for at all. He says we're going to deport criminal aliens. Technically Biden already does that. So it's like, that's not like that big of a deal. You have to really stress mass deportation because you have to strike fear into the immigrants, so then they'll self-deport. And if they all feel like they're going to be rounded up by SWAT teams and other things, they'll just head out home. So if you're saying like we're going to do mass deportation, you only need to have a few examples of that to send the message of like, you're not welcome here. You're going to need to leave. Otherwise, we're going to pick you up and make you leave. And so those are the two things that Trump has on. But DeSantis is having this trouble with outflanking, and so he's settling on the gay issue, which I think is going to go in a direction where DeSantis is going to try to outflank him, and he's going to go on a stance. He's going to settle on a stance that's not even his own, but he's going to encourage his online supporters to do this. But it's going to have problems when it comes to election time. And it's not even going to win over these people because those people who may be convinced by it are already strongly attached to Trump, and they view him as their leader and their representative and a symbol of them. And they're not going to abandon that because DeSantis found an image of Lady MAGA, who I don't even think has ever met Trump, and the video didn't highlight it. It's just like Lady MAGA, and it's such like a throwback to 2020. That's like, I haven't heard of Lady MAGA in like 2 years, and yet this video brings it back. It's like something frozen in time to win over what people were concerned about in 2020 and 2021. So it's just in a weird ad. I know I can see already the comments like, it was an incredible ad. If Trump had done this, it would have been better. It's like, yeah, no. First off, Trump campaign wouldn't release something that forced and lame. They would do something that would actually appeal to the audience of GOP primary voters. It'd be something stupid boomer. It's like the video that Trump released when DeSantis announced on Twitter Space. He did the Twitter Space, which had like DeSantis and Satan and George Soros and Adolf Hitler. It's like very boomer. It was like very funny, but the boomers would see this like, oh, I get this. This is funny. They wouldn't do something weird that they're not going to get. And other videos that are done that are pro-Trump are actually done by independent creators who are actually talented. It's not done by super PAC consultants. So that's my opinion on the video. But they're going to do more of this lame stuff. This is the last thing. Unless DeSantis's people or Casey DeSantis went over and told the PAC and the War Room to stop doing this shit. This is weird and it's pissing off people, and no more of this. But I have a feeling they're going to still try to do this lame online right culture forced attempts that are just going to get even worse with DeSantis. It'll probably be even one about like his tax policy or something with that. Now on to the Cotton Elite questions. We've got 2 today, but as a reminder, you too can get the power to ask questions or suggest guests and topics if you sign up for the Cotton Elite option at Highly Respected Substack, and that's at highlyrespected.substack.com. And make sure to sign up for the IQ supplements while you're there. People are getting so much injection of knowledge that they're getting too smart. It's working too effectively for them. The first question comes from Jay, and it's building off my IQ supplement and the changes in online right culture and what's been happening now. And he's saying that he's having a lot of fun from Twitter Spaces, and he's wondering what my opinion on that is. He's like, my topic for you, Twitter culture back then and now. Do you think the Spaces are as fun as I do? I think that Twitter Spaces are pretty fun. I think they do add a lot of that kind of authentic culture community there because people banter back and forth. There's a lot of fun topics happening. There's even dueling Twitter Spaces that are happening. I don't really participate in it much because I'm actually, for a podcast host, I don't listen that often to podcast spaces. And a lot of times when you have like online Twitter Spaces, people are talking about a variety of topics, and it's like listening in onto a conversation. but sometimes you don't feel like you're that part of that conversation. Sometimes there's like interesting moments that happen. You know, people lose their cool and then they go off and it's like very funny. And I think a lot of people enjoy that. And it offers that experience of like a friend simulator in a good possible sense. I'm not saying you guys don't have friends, but people really enjoy that from podcasts. And tons of people enjoy that from podcasts where they have like multiple hosts and they banter back and forth and you feel like you're a part of that conversation and you're listening in on this great conversation between two friends. That's obviously not happening with I Respected, as it's just me talking to you. But a lot of people like that. So I'm positive about the Twitter Spaces. I think it also adds some interesting interactions with the larger spaces where people from a right-wing perspective argue with somebody from the left or a normie perspective, and it brings out a lot of our ideas. So it's definitely good. I have a positive opinion about it. I think they brings a lot of fun back to Twitter. And not everything's so negative and heavy-handed. And it's also the Twitter Spaces, there's trying to be a lot of levity to it. You know, people aren't going off on black pills or serious discussion. Like, people like to, shoot the shit, banter back and forth, and have a good time. And I think that's, like, very important in our online spaces to ensure that we're always having a good time. So that question came from Jade. Now the second question comes from Tom. Tom talks about, Dear Scott, I've been reading Amarant's old articles from the 90s and came across one titled, Selma to Montgomery 30 years later. What went on there was utterly disturbing, like a week's long while Purgus knocked. Something I noticed was the libtard journalists from the North, shocked by the debauchery and perversion they saw, decided to report on it, but their editors censored them because they didn't want any negative coverage of the civil rights movement. Why has the media always been like this, even all the way back then? What are the realistic solutions to the problem of leftist monopoly of the media? Well, first, the media has always believed this. I mean, the media has always been liberal. They've always been dedicated to this idea that we can all get along and we need to have a race-blind and racially equal society, and that any type of racial awareness is evil and that must be destroyed. And so they've always had this opinion for a very long time, probably even going back to the 40s, even though local newspapers would reflect the opinions of the local population. If they had a local population had a very different opinion from this, the media would maybe move to reflect that. You could see this in the 40s, but over time, the national media, which there was a more development of a national media, bigger development of these TV stations, and they all had an agenda that was very opposed to what the majority of white Southerners thought, and they went down there with this preconceived notion that they wanted to implement, and saying, like, we're going to show a bunch of bigots hurting these innocent blacks, and that everything that's wrong down there is due to racism and bigotry, and we're going to expose this for the rest of the public. And then a lot of the people from the North weren't aware of the real circumstances right there. They just see these horrible images of fire hoses and dogs attacking, black kids, or, cops beating up these peaceful protesters. And that's all they see. And there wasn't like an alternative media to show like the other story. I mean, some of the local papers in Alabama and stuff would share that story, but that wouldn't reach a national audience. So that's why the media was operating in that way. And so they firmly believe this stuff, and they believe this stuff all the time. And it's the same. We saw this, as I earlier talked about, the George Floyd revolutions, where they had the CNN guy in front of a burning building saying they're mostly peaceful. They warped Americans' minds on those riots and turned them into a powerful, noble revolution that was largely peaceful, but except for a few bad actors, police agitators, they tried to claim that a white supremacist started the riots in Minneapolis, which that was just frankly totally bullshit and totally untrue. But that's how they tried to portray this stuff, and a lot of people unfortunately believed it. Media still wields a lot of power, but the solution to that is to have the development of independent media. And social media, as it worked in 2016 when there wasn't the censorship and there was ability to reach a large audience without these censors getting in the way, that was how it worked. And I think you're seeing a lot of that return under Elon Musk. Even though there's a lot of downsides to this, there's a lot of stupidity coming in there and a lot of ridiculous conspiracy theories about weather machines and other things. But at the same time, a lot of people are being exposed to ideas they would have otherwise never heard about from the mainstream media that they're now hearing about, such as the racial crime statistics that Elon Musk was sharing and sharing it to, millions of people, and that's now being discussed by millions of people. And a lot of people weren't aware of weren't aware of that data, and now they are. And so that's really the solution to it, is to have the development of independent media that's able to go around the mainstream media to deliver the truth and the facts to ordinary Americans. His last question, I'm not sure how to answer this, but he asked, do you, on a different note, I know of the poster Nemitz, but what is Nemitz's world? I'm not quite sure what would be Nemitz's world. I guess it'd be a very black-pilled, but very almost too honest viewpoint of what's going on in the world, and saying that it's like Nemitz's world is that because he would always drop nuclear black pills. He's not posting as much anymore, but I like Nemitz. Sometimes he's a little bit too black-pilled or a little bit too says things. I didn't agree with his vaccine stance, of course. But I appreciate him. I'm glad he's there. He's definitely a useful counterpoint to a lot of the popular stuff on there, which is almost, too obsessed with being white-pilled to the point of ignoring facts and actual things that are going on. And it's necessary to have those type of correctives, but you shouldn't overcorrect in some ways that Nemitz and others do. And that would be his world. I don't know if I'm answering this question correctly, but I'm pro Nemitz. He does a lot of good work. He's translated a lot of these books of frontline stories from the Ukraine war, mostly from the years prior to Russia's formal invasion last year. He's done a lot of good work with that. He's, very good book poster. So I'm very pro Nemitz. But I'm not quite sure what his world is. So that's the note we'll end on. And that is it for today's podcast. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the content we provided today and the information I utilize and offer to you. So hopefully that was all good. We're going to have a great IQ supplement later this week. And tomorrow is July 4th, so make sure to celebrate Independence Day. The big holiday. It's one of the biggest holidays we have. If we did have July 4th today, I would have not had a podcast. Last year, I did not have the podcast on July 4th because we were busy celebrating America. But, it fell on a Tuesday this year, so we had to go with the podcast forward. We may have a July 4th or Revolutionary War themed IQ supplement later this week. I'll think about it, so be on the lookout for that. So until next time, stay respected.